Opening day, of course, was this week, a special time of year, especially for someone as yourself that's been involved in baseball for some time. And I imagine in the Washington area, the last couple opening days have been a little extra special given the high expectations for this year. So your thoughts on opening day for yourself and for the Nationals, which was a great win for the Nats, and also for the fans of the Washington area?
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see over the years how this has built up. You go back to obviously the first year at RFK Stadium was a huge deal because it was the return of baseball after 33 years. But then the team went through some down years. And so there was times, and I remember them well, when they would host the Phillies on opening day and you'd have busloads of people coming down from Philadelphia, and it almost felt like a road game even though they were at home. But over the last several years, as the team has gotten better, as they've become regular playoff contenders, I think it's turned into more of an event around here and a time for local fans to really celebrate the beginning of the season and have all that optimism and hope that you want to have on opening day. And as far as the game on Monday, the team did a pretty good job of boosting up that optimism because pretty much everything you'd want to see happen, it did. Steven Strasburg pitched well. Bryce Harper homered again on opening day. One of the new guys, Adam Lind, homered to give them the lead. And then the back of the bullpen, which I think for a lot of people has been their biggest question or reason for concern about this team, was lights out also. And Blake Trinan, the new closer, was 1, 2, 3 in the ninth. And so, look, we all overanalyze opening day because it's the only game we have to work with for 48 hours. But I think it would be hard not, if you're a Nats fan, it would be hard not to get excited about what you saw in the first game of the season.
You mentioned the bullpen. Blake Trinan, of course, won the closer's role. Dusty Baker identified him as the closer to start the year. Sean Kelly, of course, and Coda Glover, very good candidates as well. Could you talk a little bit about the bullpen heading into the season? It seems in years past there was always a question somewhere in the bullpen, but this year they seem really loaded front to back. And, of course, Joe Blanton, a late off-season addition, was thrown into the mix, a guy who rejuvenated his career with the Dodgers a couple years ago as a multi-innings reliever. The bullpen really looks like one of the strengths of this year's team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I think a lot of people on the outside have looked at this as a weakness for the team because they went into the off season and wound up going into spring training without an established closer. After cycling through guys over the last few years, after the Jonathan Papelbon experiment didn't work out, and then after Mark Melancon, who was so great for them, wound up signing with San Francisco instead, I think it left a lot of people concerned. What I've been trying to say, and I think what the people with the organization have felt all along, is that this is actually a really talented and deep bullpen. This was the second best bullpen in baseball by ERA last year. And while no, they didn't have that guy who has proven himself in the ninth inning, they had 3 or 4 guys who could take a claim to it, and probably a good 5 guys that you could say these are real legitimate late inning, back of the game kind of established pitchers. And so they had their options. They decided to go with Blake Trinan because they think that his power sinker really fits that role. They looked at what Zach Britton has done in Baltimore and see kind of a similar style of pitcher there. But I think beyond the closer, I think they feel like if they can get you into the 6th or 7th inning with a lead between Trinan, Kelly, Blanton, Coda Glover, who may become the closer someday, Sammy Solis, the lefty, who was really good on opening day in a setup role. Enny Romero is a guy most people have not heard of, a big left-hander who throws 99 miles an hour and blew him away this spring to make the team. That's a lot of depth, and they feel like if they can take a lead into the late innings, they're going to lock stuff down. It's going to be really hard for opponents to come back against them. And so I actually do agree. I think this is going to be one of their strengths this season, provided that Trinan can handle the pressure of being the closer. And based on what we saw in Game 1, I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, going through the heart of the Marlins order for opening day. Mark, what's your thoughts overall on the offseason moves and the way that the Nationals apparently look to move forward and keep that momentum going after a successful 2016? Do you think they added enough pieces with Adam Eaton shoring up the outfield and the top of the order and bringing in Matt Wieters behind the plate? Did they do enough in the offseason, and what grade would you give the Nats front office this offseason?
Well, it's funny because when you look at their recent history after they've won a title or won a division title and then failed in the playoffs, you've seen Mike Rizzo go out and make some kind of really bold move that almost kind of bolsters what was already a strength. Think about the Max Scherzer signing, for example. They didn't need another starter. They already had one of the best rotations in baseball, and then they went out and spent $210 million on another ace. And so some people said, well, wait a minute, maybe they were expecting something again like that this winter. And instead, I think they were more calculated moves. I think they looked at this and said, you know what, this was a 95-win team last year, despite the fact that, Bryce Harper had a rough year, Ryan Zimmerman had a bad year, the instability at closer. So they felt like, let's keep what we have here and then try to fill in the holes that we think we have. And Adam Eaton was a big part of that. Now, they gave up a lot for him. There was a lot of negative reaction that they would give up two top prospects in Lucas Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez for a guy who's not considered a real star player. But I think Eaton is going to fit in with this team really well because I think the things he does well are the things they've needed more of. And you saw it on opening day. Yeah. Works in at bat really well. He was on base 3 different times. He runs well. Delivers a hit when you need it, but can also be that table setter and steal a base if you need it. By getting him and putting him in center field, it allowed them to move Trey Turner to shortstop, which is his natural position. So I really think this guy's going to be good for them, if not that headlining star-level player. And then I think the other moves they made were very calculated. Again, they bided their time. They waited. They got Joe Blanton on a fairly affordable deal after spring training had started. They got Adam Lind on the eve of spring training. And while Matt Wieters was not necessarily on their radar all winter, it wasn't particularly a guy they wanted to go after because they felt like he was going to get a bigger contract than they felt he was worth. By the time they got to, late February, he was still available, and they could get him essentially for 1 year and $10.5 million. I think Rizzo and the organization looked at that and said, you know what? This guy will make our team better. He's better than what we already have, and it's a very affordable price, so go ahead and do it. So I think it was actually a smart offseason in the end for them, that the money they spent was calculated, and they didn't let the market force the issue on them. They waited it out, and I think wound up getting some pretty good deals in the end.
You mentioned Trey Turner. We had him on our show last year. Saw quite a bit of him at AAA. Boy, you really have to like him. Talking with him before and after games, seeing what he does out on the field. He's a guy that seems to really get it, and I imagine he's been fitting in quite well with his new role at the major league level. What are your expectations for Trey Turner for this year and beyond?
Yeah, well, first of all, as a player, he's just been everything they could have asked for and more. And really the more is the story here, because I think most people viewed him as a classic leadoff hitter with great speed who's going to put the bat on the ball. And, that's a really valuable thing to have. And then he came up last year and you realize, oh, wow, he's got power too. 12 or 13 home runs, I think, in about half a season that he was up in the big leagues. So he's got that weapon. And I think the best description of him, I think it was Ryan Zimmerman who said this last year about him, is a lot of times you just think of these classic leadoff hitters as they're just really fast guys who happen to play baseball. And in this case, Trey Turner is a really good baseball player who also happens to be incredibly fast, maybe the fastest guy in the league. He's got all the skills, and that's going to make him a really dangerous weapon for them. And then, like you were saying, on top of it all, he's got the personality and I think the understanding of knowing what his place is in this game and getting the fact that he is going to be a big-name guy. He joked about early in spring training he went out to dinner with Bryce Harper, and people came flocking to Bryce, and nobody even realized who Trey was sitting there next to him.
Yeah.
That won't be the case for much longer. I think people are going to learn who he is, and I think he's okay with that idea. I think he gets how to deal with the attention and the expectations, and being one of, they have many of them on this team now because they have a lot of stars, but being one of the faces of this franchise for a long time.
Mark, when we talked yesterday, you shared a very interesting idea about how the Nationals proceed the first few weeks of April. As you well know, it's always tricky, especially when the Nats have a solid front four in their starting rotation. The fifth guy often gets bumped. So what do you think the plan is? Could you share your idea of what the Nats might do and have the Nats actually set anything as far as what they'll do for the next few weeks for the number 5 spot in their rotation?
No, they've been a little bit coy about this. As they're, certainly is their right to do if they don't want other teams to know what their plan is. But you can kind of piece it together based on how they made some moves here at the end of the spring. They only carried 4 starting pitchers on the opening day roster. Obviously, they're going to need a fifth starter, but they don't need it until this weekend in Philadelphia. Joe Ross was and is their number 5 starter, but they decided to actually option him to AAA to open the year. And because of that, there's actually a rule that says if you're optioned to the minors, you have to stay there for 10 days. You can't be called back up unless somebody else gets injured and you're replacing them. So barring an injury, Joe Ross actually isn't going to be eligible to come back yet this weekend. And that's why I actually think the number 5 starter, at least for one turn, is going to be Jeremy Guthrie, the old veteran who wasn't even in the big leagues last year, but he had a great spring for them. He was competing ostensibly to be the long man out of the bullpen. They decided to not put him on the opening day roster, but he's still with the organization, still working out. And I would not be surprised if they actually call him up to start in Philadelphia this weekend, and then after that decide whether they want to keep him as a long man in the bullpen, in which case they'd have to lose one of their bench players. But either way, Joe Ross is going to be at Syracuse, probably make 2 or even 3 starts until that number 5 starter spot comes up again. And at that point, come April 22nd, I think it is, something like that, then I think we will see Joe Ross, and he'll be off and running for the rest of the season as long as he stays healthy. So they're playing with the roster here early on, but the off days allow you the ability to do that. The fact that some of these players have minor league options means you can send them up and down. And so I think they're taking advantage, essentially, of the rules that allow them to adjust their roster and realizing, hey, we don't play every 5 days or 5 days in a row that often in April, so why carry a fifth starter when we can carry someone else who might actually help our team on a daily basis?
Mark, before we let you go, I'd like to pin you down and get some predictions. Obviously, the expectations are raised for the Nationals this year. So what do you think as far as the division and postseason honors? And also, Bryce Harper. There's a lot of talk about his impending free agency down the road. Do you think the Nationals will try to lock him up early? Will Scott Boras go along with that? Or what might happen if he does, in fact, hit the free agent market?
Well, let's start with Harper, because this is probably the question on so many people's minds around D.C. and around baseball.
Yeah.
And it has been for a while. And all I can say is the Nats would love to engage in some talks. It doesn't seem like much of anything has been made progress so far at this point, because if you're Bryce Harper, you think about it, you had an MVP season in 2015. You want to talk numbers then, but then you had the down year last year. Well, you don't want to try to sign a contract at that point because your value has just gone down. You've got 2 years to go until free agency. Most of the time you get that close, you want to test the waters and see what you can get. So I think it will come to that. Now, whether he stays or whether he goes, I've always believed that this is less about money and more about where does he want to spend the bulk of his career. He appreciates the idea of being a guy who spends his whole career with one team. He knows very few guys do that anymore. And so I think there is some appeal there, but I think he also is such a student of the game and understands the history of who the greatest players are, and most of them have played for the really iconic franchises. And if he does go somewhere else, I really believe it's going to be a New York or a Boston or Chicago or L.A., something like that. I don't think he's just going to take a ton of money to go play in Seattle, all due respect to the Mariners and the good people of Seattle. So this is going to play out over the next 2 years, and I think the Nationals' success or lack of success is going to have as much a role to do with all this as anything else. If he feels like this is a franchise that can become one of those iconic ones, then maybe he does stay here for the long haul. If not, then maybe he does look to go to play in the Bronx or Fenway Park or Wrigley Field or wherever else might be available to him. So I would tell Nats fans, enjoy these 2 years. You're going to get him in his prime, and then see what happens. You never know what may happen. As far as this year's team goes, look, I think they are better than last year's team that won 95 games. Obviously, there are injuries and things that can happen that can derail that, but I sense there is a lot of belief in that clubhouse of some unfinished business. They have not won a playoff series yet. They know that. They want to take that next step. The Mets are good. They're going to challenge them. I think it is going to be a good race throughout. I do think the Mets have more injury concerns than the Nationals, and so that's why I lean to the Nats. I've got them winning 97 games, winning the division. And then I've got them winning a playoff series, one, and then they're going to have to face the Cubs in the NLCS, and that's going to be a tough challenge. So I've got them losing in that round. But they are good enough to win a World Series. I don't think there's any question. It's just a matter of, can they get through the season? And then can you win a 5-game and then a 7-game series when it really matters in October? It's a hard thing to do, and these guys want to get over that hump desperately. Their fans desperately want them to get over that hump because they've been waiting a long time in this town for anybody to win, and they would love for one of the teams, if not certainly the Nationals, to be the one that finally does it.
Yeah, they're certainly off to a great start, especially after that opening day performance. Mark, thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the Phillies series coming up and have a great 2017 season.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Mark.